Hi, happy first sexy first Friday. I am just waiting for Sam to come on. I've had some issues with my ring light falling over, so hopefully that doesn't happen today. But we are super excited to talk about today about the applications for therapy and personal healing, how impactful the Enneagram has and instincts has been in that for the work that we do, as well as personal transformation. So I'm just waiting for Sam to hop on, and we are excited to share all things Enneagram and instincts in the applications for therapy and personal healing. So she should be here any moment, and we'll just kind of hang tight until she gets here. I'm in Minneapolis. It is cold out there, by the way. I went for a quick walk in between before we started this, and I was like, ooh, it's frigid today out there. He's here. I'm just accepting that. Hopefully we have no snafus today. Yay, we did it. Everybody is here. Sam and I got on right before the live just to check, and we're like, oh my gosh, we're wearing the exact same color. Not planned, not intentional. And I also said neither of us should change because this is awesome.
It's Green Day.
It's Green Day. You would think in March you maybe would have been doing that, but no, why not for May?
Yeah, I love it.
Well, welcome everyone. Today's is episode 29 of Sexy First Fridays, and today we're going to be talking about the applications for therapy and personal healing in relationship to the Enneagram and instincts in sexuality. We will do our general intros, though many of you know us by now, but I will start and then I'll have Sam share a little bit about herself. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a certified sex therapist, an IA accredited professional out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I specialize in relationships and sexuality in my private practice in South Minneapolis. And then I often forget to tell people what my Enneagram type is, so I will do that today. I am an Enneagram Type 9 who is social dominant. Tell us a little bit about you, Sam.
Perfect. I am a sexuality researcher, primarily, and I am also an Enneagram coach specializing in sexuality, intimacy, and relationships. I am an Enneagram 5 that with a sexual dominant. And my research is focused on the intersection between sexual desire and Enneagram type and instinct. So the study revealed, of course, as we know, that there are discernible patterns of sexual desire and expression by type and instinct. And that is one of the things that we talk about in almost every episode.
And we are really excited today. And today is going to be a little bit different because we're going to be focusing on the applications for therapy and personal healing because we have this workshop coming up in person in July in South Minneapolis that we are super excited about. It's on July 28th and it's at the Center of Performing Arts. And so we hope to see some of you there in person. Sam and I live in different states, so the opportunity to actually be in person and work with people and see them, like, we are super excited. We have been working really hard. Actually, we have all of the educational pieces done because we've just been so excited about this workshop that all we have left to do is kind of more the experiential piece, which is not like a 9 and 5, by the way, to be this far ahead.
We're in
And
the
so
flow.
exactly, we are in the flow, and we are making movement fast, which is not our typical. And so we're going to use today kind of more as a teaser to tell you a little bit about that workshop. Anything you wanted to add about that piece, Sam?
Yeah, we didn't say the name. So it's the Enneagram for Transformed Relationships. And that's an all-day workshop that we're doing. That's coming up in July, on July 28th, like Lyndsey said. And the focus of the workshop, obviously, from the name, is transforming relationships, transforming a relationship with the self, with the partner, if there's one, and helping therapists, coaches transform their clients. So we have actually two tracks within our Enneagram for Transform Relationships workshop. It's for everybody. Even if you don't know the Enneagram, we have Enneagram review at the beginning, and we can provide extra help on breaks and everything. So if you're even new to the Enneagram, you're welcome at this workshop. But it's for therapists, coaches, and teachers and individuals who want to do transformation, because we'll have two tracks for the experiential portion, a therapist track and a personal growth, personal healing track, which is why we're talking about both today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing that's been big for me, like when I go to workshops, even if they've been in relation to like getting my therapy CEUs, is that I always find them the most impactful if I can apply them to my own life as well as applying them to clients' life. And so when we set this up, we really wanted it to be something where not only are you working on yourself and understanding yourself more, but like knowing that actually makes you a much more impactful therapist and coach. And so it's really a both end, and it is open to people that want to transform themselves as well as working with clients in this area. We thought a good way to start out is like why we both are into this work. So a little bit about kind of our personal stories that brought us into this work and why it is so essential, or why we feel like it is so essential to understand sort of the impact of Enneagram type and instinct and sexuality. It's had huge transformation for me personally, as well as in the work with clients. My own personal story is, so I was a therapist and a certified sex therapist even before I started using the Enneagram in my practice. And one of the reasons I was drawn to sexuality work in the first place, and you're going to see that Sam and I are very different in this because we have different instincts, so hint, is that I wasn't seeing people like myself in the sexuality work, nor people that approach sex in the way that I did. And I didn't really understand like why that was or what was happening there, but there was this real drive to want to be a sexuality therapist so that people like me could be seen. One of the things that came out of that is that what I realized when I learned the Enneagram type, and especially the instincts, it was because I was a social instinct dominant. And most of the work that is written out there on sexuality, especially for therapists, is really written by people that are sexual instinct dominants. There will be some people that are self-preservation dominants, especially when you get to behavioral kind of step-in and techniques and things like that in the sex therapy world. But the majority of it is written by sexual instinct dominants. And if you're social dominant or self-preservation dominant, you don't see yourselves in that work that is out there. And it makes complete sense because sexual instinct dominants are going to be attracted to sexuality and want to know more about sexuality. And so social and self-preservation dominants, it's not that we don't like it, but it's not necessarily in our revolving world all of the time. And so for me, it was just this really big desire to help people feel seen for who they are and normalize that there are many different or three different sort of approaches to sexuality. And then we had some type that comes in and creates the nuance, but both were so influential in understanding myself as well as understanding clients. Tell us a little bit about what you brought you to this work, Sam.
Okay, I'd love to. And I also have a follow-up question for you. So a little bit of a different inroad to this work for me. Like Lyndsey said, I am a sexual dominant, although I'm a sexual dominant 5, which is a little bit not quite hitting the stereotypes of sexual dominance, because the 5-ness really brings that internally and only to the immediate intimates. Much more than some of our, like, for example, assertive sexual dominance, which are, sexual dominant very obviously in the world. But I worked in sexuality for most of my life as an internal researcher, sexuality organizations. And I started to become curious. I've been working with the Enneagram for many years, over 17 years. And I became very curious about how my Enneagram type was experiencing sexuality compared to others that I was seeing in my work and my personal life. So I started to form some hypotheses about, okay, well, me as a 5, I approach sexuality in this particular way. There's a certain head-centeredness to it, many other things. I'm sure that that's because I'm a 5. I want to go and research this. And that this is the very question that brought me to seeking a PhD researcher, because I wanted to do this research myself. It hadn't been done at the time. As I started to do the research, and even after I met you, Lyndsey, I had the research in process through my relationship with you and with the other folks in our Enneagram and Sexuality working group we were in at the time. It started to become clear that many of the things that I thought I was doing because I'm a five, I was actually doing because I'm a sexual dominant. So I had assumed that all fives are going to be like me, and it turned out in the research they were not at all. In fact, my hypotheses about fives specifically were almost all incorrect, whereas many of my hypotheses about other types were correct. So I was like really totally wrong even about myself as extrapolated to other fives. It turned out sexual dominant, other sexual dominants were more similar to me. So that was a whole discovery process, not just about myself, but about this whole model of how this works. That, like Lyndsey said, we have our instinct creating the whole framework of our sexuality, and then our type is more about the nuance. So it's discovering that as a five, head-centered researcher person, I was discovering this all through data in real time. And that's what I found to be really transformative about the way I see the world and the way I had started my coaching, the way I was coaching people, and just understanding sexuality in general is all through this model. And my follow-up question for you, Lyndsey, was you said it really helped you understand yourself better. I'm curious, a little more about that. Like, what did it help you understand, and how did that sort of transform the way that you see yourself, or the way that you talk about your sexuality and relationship, or the way that you work as a sex therapist?
Yeah, I think the interesting piece is sort of, so for me, my instinctual stacking is social self-preservation and then sexual last, which I think will give a lot of information to actually what was happening for me. Because when you think of the sexual instinct, it's all about that playing with the sexual energy, the intensity between the partner, that kind of like merging with the other. And what I would find in relationships is that energy would be there in the first like 9 months to a year and a half. And it would actually be very overwhelming for me. And then it would sort of go back to where it was, where I was just like, oh, that just happens in the beginning of relationships. That doesn't last all the time. And I don't have to deal with that intensity or that overwhelm. Or if I had people come towards me before that had that sexual instinct, it would overwhelm me a lot. And a lot of the messages I was getting from society is that I should like this, and this should be exciting and thrilling. And the reality is it was a lot for me. And I think in the last couple of years, I've really tried to tap into that more and live in that space of sexual instinct, but it takes a lot of work for me. And then having complaints from partners that I wasn't passionate enough and I had no clue what they were talking about because I'm passionate. I got my career. I got my group of people I spend time with. It was just way over my head. And I think this is another thing that a lot of us don't understand too, is that like that last instinct and how impactful it is about how we show up. And so when I realized this, I was like, oh, I am normal. I'm just different. And there are a lot of clients that when they have this, and we're going to talk a little bit about some like client impact too. It's like when they have this understanding of like all of it is normal, and it's kind of owning who you are as a sexual person. And it helped me feel more confident and comfortable in like, this is who I am, and that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with me that I view or think about sexuality different than others. And so it's been, and also like how important it is to still tap in a little bit to that sexual instinct. And that when I do, like I can hold it in places that helps me feel more alive, but I can contain it in a way that's not overwhelming for me. And there's been a lot of actual excitement for that, hence the bright clothing. I would have never I would very rarely wore bright clothing in my life until the last few years. And it feels so good to wear bright clothing in such a weird way that you will notice sexual instinct dominants do most of the time.
That makes me think of maybe a good transition to some of our case examples, because what you talked about, I realize I'm normal. I'm just different. this is something that helps couples, and we both work with couples. Usually, or a lot of times when couples come in, it's like one of them or both of them think that their way of being sexual is the way that everyone is sexual, and that there just must be something wrong about their partner who's a totally different instinctual stacking, a totally different type, because they're not sexual the way I'm sexual. Well, there's only one way to be sexual, right? We're not taught about this. And it takes sometimes very little intervention to teach folks that no, there's these three primary dominant ways to be sexual. Then within those 9 sub nuanced ways to be sexual. And soon as people start to understand this about each other, a lot of the judgment and tension can lift, and then we can have compassion for each other. So Lyndsey and I want to share some examples of how we've seen this model that, we've researched, worked with clinically, and basically developed together and with others, how we've seen this model transform the lives of clients. So Lyndsey, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about 9 and 1, and in particular, this is a social one and sexual 9, and just the idea sometimes that will come up with that particular dynamic. And actually, I have a few couples with this particular dynamic, so if any of you are listening, it's not one of you specifically. In the sense of like what I see a lot is that, for instance, there can kind of be a right way to be sexual or desire or want to share fantasies. Ones might be able to tap into that a little bit better, especially if they were given the environment or the permission that it's okay to do so, because ones can be a little bit more influenced by societal messages or family messages that they received about sexuality. But if they have some openness around that, ones are really thinking a lot. They almost have that access to 7 in a way that I think is really exciting. And what I've seen happen sometimes is that they then go to their 9 partner and are sharing these fantasies or ideas or things that they want to do. And then they're asking their 9 partner kind of like, what do you fantasize about? What do you want to do? And sometimes the response that you're going to get, especially a sexual 9, and I think why it's important to note a sexual 9 here is that sexual 9s are the ones that are most known for merging with the partner and becoming the partner. So following the partner's lead, liking what the partner likes, especially if they're more fixated. And so when you're asking a sexual 9 what they like, there can be sort of an automatic response of like overwhelm. I don't know. You're overwhelming by this question. Why are you asking me this? Whatever you like. And it can be then that the one has some frustration because they want to have this connection together, us bonding, us sharing these things that we both like and have an interest. And so it can become sort of this thing where like I often will say is ones, when you ask a 9, plant seeds. So you plant the seed of like, have you ever thought about doing a roping class? And then just kind of let it go. And give them space and give them patience and let them kind of sit with it. And eventually they will kind of come back to you. Or have you ever thought about having sex on the beach? Put it out there, let it go, and wait for them to come back to you. And oftentimes what I will see is it could be real slow, like a few years, but the 9 is thinking about it. And the more permission that you give them to come to you with those ideas, but they really oftentimes do not know what they like, and it takes a lot of work on the self to understand that. And so I think when I've done that is that ability to be like, your 9 wants to engage with you. They want to share their fantasies with you too. But when you ask them on the spot, they don't have an answer because they don't know. And they often follow your lead in what you enjoy. And that can feel one-sided, right? Like, I want this to be a give and take and a back and forth. And so those are just some of the transformations that I've seen with that particular typing and instinct is that understanding of like, this is who you are as a person. And though you might be quicker than your partner, sometimes they need more space to come to what they like or what they want. And that's why, again, like, had you not known that, it could be, the one, for instance, partner might be like, oh, they're not interested in engaging in fantasies with me, or, oh, they don't want to be adventurous, or, oh, they don't want to do this. And actually, we know from your research Sam, that like nines are kind of willing to like do a lot of things. Like they're really open to it, but you might not even know that because you haven't given them the space to discover what they like. And then for nines on the other end is it's like, it's okay to tell your partner, I don't know. I need some space to think about that. Let me come back to you. So that's just one example, I think, of like how transformative it can be. Why don't you share one of your examples, Sam?
Okay, perfect. I already like could talk for this whole episode just about that combination because it made me think of so many things from working with nines, but I want to give people some examples of other types too. So one that springs to mind for me is a 6-1 couple that I work with ongoingly, but that didn't really need, full sex therapy or couples therapy, or even really in-depth work and coaching. All they needed to move them out of stuckness was just this model of Enneagram and sexuality. So, it's a 6-1 couple, and they had been stuck around quite a few things, but especially around sexuality for years and years and years. They came in, and we have it's the female one and male six in this case, heterosexual couple. Um, the female one is a self-preservation one, has all this feeling of burden on her, that she puts on herself, but then other people, her family, her coworkers, have seen how hyper responsible she is and have put things on her as well. And she's just like, I don't feel sexy because I have so much to do. And the six, we know, sixes are really triggered around their safety and security of their relationship. The one was getting, rejection, what he perceived as rejection whenever he would try to initiate sex. She's like, oh, I have so much to do, I can't. He would just be like, oh no, our relationship's gonna fall apart. Social six, like our bond is off if we're not having regular sex. I see out in the world people are getting divorced. That's going to be me. Starts catastrophizing, and I would go in this circle all the time. All it took for them was for them to understand that she does want you. She is just completely under the weight of all of her burdens and to-do lists. And that the sexiest thing you can do for any self-preservation dominant, but especially a self-pres one, is take things off their to-do list and do them right. So they had a little bit of frustration in the past when he had tried to do that. It wasn't, to her standards, and she'd be like, "Oh, I'll just do it myself." So we had to work through that. But eventually he took on the cooking for their family. And it turns out he's a better cook. He likes it more, more nutritious meals happening. Everyone's happy. And suddenly she's like, I'm so much more interested in moving into sexuality because I don't have to think about this thing where I have to cook all the time and I hate cooking. And it was so simple, but years and years and years of struggling, they hadn't thought of this. And, just this model opened this up for them of these possibilities. That was probably the biggest single thing that they did that transformed their sexual relationship because she felt way less stressed, and then naturally space starts opening up in her, that kind of like her libido can expand and she can demonstrate more interest in the partner, and then he feels more secure, and then we got into the positive cycle instead of the negative one. So that is a really good example of how just even coming to a one-day training or a training that we do could transform without even going to therapy or anything. In some cases, just knowing this information is transformative.
That is so huge, Sam, because you're right. Sometimes it's like they just get the information or you just learn this information and you can like transform yourself. You don't even need you or I for therapy or coaching. And you could have been sitting with this thing that was making you feel stuck for a while. This is going so quickly as it normally does. Should I still go into the self-preservation and sexual, or should we sort of kind of get to the wrap up, or what are your thoughts
I
for
think
today?
we have time for
Okay.
probably for one more.
Okay, well, I think the biggest one that we wanted to bring into, which is what brings couples to our office the most frequently, is a sexual instinct dominant in relationship with self-preservation dominant. And Sam and I will both talk a little bit about this. We actually did have one more, but I don't think we're going to have time today to go into that one. But this one feels essential because it is one where the difference of what each partner needs is so huge. And they often do end up in our coaching or therapy offices around this. We know for sexual instinct dominance, it's about desirability, playing with sexual energy, merging with the partner, it being you and I in this together. And for the self-preservation dominance, as we've talked about before, it is about having your basic needs met. So sex becomes more about like, how efficient can it be? What are the body pleasure sensations? Can we move through this quick? And they need to have everything sort of just right. So like if I'm hungry or if I'm cold or like I had a stressful day at work, that context, and context is those things that influence our ability to actualize desire. And so what you see here, right? One person who can actualize desire really easily and one person that has to really move through to get there. And so when you have this dichotomy happening, what happens is like the sexual instinct dominant doesn't feel like they're desirable or wanted. And the self-preservation person's like, I don't understand what the problem is here. I'm taking care of us. We're good to go. And so I think, a lot of times, and I'm making this really brief because we don't have a whole lot of time left today, but just that ability of like, can you imagine why there would be issues around a sexual relationship when you have these two dominant instincts in play? And so a lot of it I've seen for couples is just even that ability to recognize that this thing is present relieves something. Oh, it's not about you not desiring me. It's about that you have a list of things or like there's certain bodily needs that you have that need to be met first before you want to move in with that. Oh, I get like you want me to desire you and want you. And I was doing that. I was cooking for you. I was cleaning the home. I was bringing home your favorite snack. I didn't realize that you weren't feeling desire when I was doing these things for you. Can just be a real huge thing for couples. And then usually it's about working on like what the good enough sex is, which can take some work sometimes. More often than not, these couples actually probably are going to need a little bit of therapy or coaching to move through that. But just knowing that like it's normal. What would you add, Sam?
And if you're watching this and you're one of those couples, do not fret and be like, "Oh no, we need help." It's an extremely common pairing for a reason. We have complementary strengths, we have opposites attract. So it's totally okay. It's just that this tends to be what comes up. And the only thing I would add is something that I work on with folks with this combination is that they actually even kind of see time differently, where the self-preservation will see the long term and the sexual sees the short term. So the sexual dominant is like in the short term, let's say it's months, in the short term months, we haven't been merging, we haven't been passionate, I haven't been feeling desired. Oh no, like I really need that, something's wrong. And self-pres has this long-term, over years we're fine, over years we're stable, we're going to be okay. I can see that like long-term, the short-term stuff doesn't matter. Both of those perspectives are accurate. We want to be connected in the short term and we want to have an eye on the stability of the long term. So those can really affect the way each of these view sexuality as well. Where the sexual dominant can think, for example, it's been a sexual dry spell of a month or so, that's a huge, huge problem. Like I can barely function. And the self-preservation can look at a month or so as if like it's the blink of an eye. Like, oh, how did that happen so fast? Like it's not a big deal. We'll get back to it. So even learning that, the temporal differences and how in the perspective, those things can help. And it really is just learning kind of almost like a language of your partner, their sexual language, and starting to speak it.
That is so true, Sam. I love what you just added on there too. Um, Well, I think to kind of quickly wrap up, because we just have a few minutes left, like, we wanted to talk a little bit about like why we created this workshop. So you can see just even from the things that we're sharing, like how transformative this has been in our own personal lives, as well as clients. And like, we want to give you tools and knowledge and capacity and ability to transform your own relationships, as well as transform those relationships with your clients if you are a therapist or a coach. The nice thing is if you are a therapist, we did get 5.5 CEUs approved by the Board of Marriage and Family Therapy in Minnesota, which includes 2 ethical CEUs. no, sorry, one ethical CEU and two cultural. I did that opposite. And so you have that opportunity to also get your CEUs while you are in the process of coming and meeting with us in person. And I think that the other thing that's really hugely impactful, like this is a really new topic, a new concept, a new way of thinking of how to work with sexuality in your office, with your clients and with yourself. And Sam and I feel really honored to be able to teach people and help them learn how they themselves can like use these tools too. Anything you would add on that, Sam, before we wrap up?
That was perfect. The only thing I want to add is we've had a lot of interest from therapists already, so which is amazing. The reason we think it's so helpful, in addition to everything Lyndsey shared for supporting clients, is we know outside of sex therapists that other couples therapists don't usually get a lot of training around sexuality, maybe one course, and it's not quite enough because, sex is always on the table with couples in the therapy room, in the coaching room. So we feel like this can really augment training for the helping professions that didn't receive much training around sexuality. So we hope our therapists, coaches, and teachers will come, as well as people just interested in their individual and relational transformation. And our pre-sale for this all-day workshop ends on May 15th. And you're in luck because we actually had just extended it because of a little bit of a snafu with our advertising not going out as early. So it's 2 weeks extended, but it's just going to end on May 15th. So you have 2 weeks to sign up with the pre-sale rate.
And that is it. As usual, Sexy First Friday went quick. It always does for me. Such a pleasure to see you again, Sam. Thank you for all of those that joined and all of those that will watch this later. And don't ever hesitate to DM Sam or I if you have ideas or things you want to see us do more of, or you just have questions. We always answer those. So have a wonderful, I wanted to say Tuesday. It is not Tuesday, Friday. Have a wonderful Friday, and we will see you next month for Sexy First
Happy
Friday.
May.
Bye.
Happy Green Shirt Day.
Happy Green Shirt Day.